Historic motor racing started in Australia in the late 1950s, when a group of owners of pre-World War II racing and sports cars formed a loose-knit association in order to race their machines. The cars are broken into groups, depending on the type of race car and the era they raced in. Group L, for instance, is for racing and sports cars that originally competed between 1941 and 1960. Historic racing cars generally have to be over 20 years old and not still competitive in a current non-historical class of racing. Rather than being consigned to the scrap heap, many older and once great racing cars have been given a second life in historic race meetings that are regularly held at circuits around the country. Many of the old circuits these cars used to race at, like Warwick Farm and Catalina, closed long ago. Today, much of the racing in Sydney takes place at Eastern Creek. In the late 1950s, light rear-engine racing cars, like the Cooper Climaxes, arrived on the scene. They used a 2,500cc engine built by the Coventry Climax Company. Australia's Jack Bratham would win his first 2 World Drivers' Championships behind the wheel of Cooper Climaxes. Eventually, these smaller, more nimble machines would dominate motorsport worldwide. Jim Clark won his first World Drivers' Championship in a Lotus Climax 25 like this one. It uses a 1,500cc Coventry Climax engine and was the first Formula One Grand Prix car to use a monocoque chassis. One of the most popular classes in historic motorsport revives the golden era of Australian touring car racing. These cars are racing in Group N for touring cars built until 1973. The rules at the time specified that the cars had to be standard and weren't allowed modifications, except for safety features like roll bars. While historic motor racing was originally designed only to cater for the actual cars that raced in a historical period, some categories, like historic touring cars, now accept the use of replicas as commonplace. Cars like the Ford Falcon GTHOs are often replicas, although a number of cars with distinguished racing pasts still compete. Groups A and C are for slightly more modern touring cars. These were allowed some modifications and raced from 1973 to 1992. Historic motorsport also affords a chance for drivers who have retired from professional racing to get behind the wheel and compete again. Here, 9 times Bathurst champion Peter Brock, driving a Tirana A9X, takes on a couple of Nissan Skylines. In most race meetings, access to the pit area is restricted to the competitors, their teams and officials. But at historic race meetings, the public are welcome to enter the pits and wander freely, giving the spectators a chance to view the classic race cars close up. This model Jaguar, the C-Type, was specifically built for sports car racing. The C designation stood for competition, and the model won the Le Mans 24 Hours in 1951 and 1953. Historic race meetings are often organised around a theme. For this event, it was a revival of the Tasman Cup series. The feature race was for cars that would have been eligible to race in the Tasman Cup between 1964 and 1969. The Tasman Cup was generally run on 3 circuits in New Zealand and 4 in Australia. Warwick Farm near Sydney being the venue for the New South Wales events. The Lotus 49s like this one were the first cars to use the 3000cc Ford Cosworth engine. This engine would go on to be the most successful engine in Formula One history. The other radical feature of the Lotus 49 was that it was painted in its sponsor's colours. Previously, Grand Prix cars had carried their national colours. Jim Clark in the Lotus 49 won the Tasman Cup in 1968, so perhaps fittingly, this meeting's feature race was won eventually by John Smith driving a Lotus 49. One of the Tasman Revival's highlights was the appearance of a Repco Brabham BT19 that was raced by Jack Brabham in 1966, the year he won his 3rd World Drivers' Championship. Repco had previously been working with Brabham, developing a 2500cc engine for use in the Tasman Cup races. In 1966 they increased the engine's capacity to 3000 cc's to suit the changed Formula One rules. The Repco Brabham had less power than its rivals, but was lighter and had a tested and more reliable engine. These Formula One cars from the 70s and 80s have now become part of the sport's history. Jackie Stewart won his 2nd World Drivers' Championship in 1971 behind the wheel of a Tyrrell 004. In 1978, Mario Andretti, behind the wheel of a Lotus 79, would win the World Drivers' Championship, the 6th and last time it was won by a Lotus driver. Historic race meetings are a chance to see classic racing machines once again driven at speed. The drivers aren't simply trying to parade their cars or mildly recreate past races. The cars are still serious racing machines, and they are raced the way they were always meant to be, pushed to 10 tenths, still providing the excitement and thrills of a past era, driven by a dedicated group of enthusiasts keeping the history of motor racing in Australia alive.